3 men vanish from a locked lighthouse in the middle of the sea, with no bodies, no struggle, and a clock that stopped mid-shift. What really happened on the Flannan Isles? 15 miles west of the Isle of Lewis, off the wild edge of Scotland, sits a cluster of jagged rocks called the Flannan Isles. Sailors called them the Seven Hunters. Locals believed them haunted. Shepherds who once grazed sheep there refused to spend the night. So, when the Northern Lighthouse Board decided to build a lighthouse on the largest island, Island Moor, in the late 1890s, it was considered one of the most dangerous and remote postings in Britain. The lighthouse was finished in 1899. It stood 75 feet tall, perched 150 feet above the crashing Atlantic. 3 keepers lived there at a time, rotating with the 4th man who took shore leave. Life was hard, isolated, and monotonous, but routine. Ships passing at night depended on that beam of light to warn them off the rocks. On December 15, 1900, the steamer Archer passed by at night and noticed something wrong. The light was out. No one thought much of it right away. Storms sometimes knocked out visibility. But when the relief boat, the Hesperus, finally made it out to the island on December 26th, delayed by bad weather, what the crew found would become one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in maritime history. As the Hesperus approached Island Moor, something felt off immediately. No flag was raised to greet them. No supply boxes waited on the landing stage, as was custom, and no keepers came out to help unload. Joseph Moore, one of the relief keepers, went ashore alone. He later described the eerie silence. The gate to the compound was closed, the entrance door was closed, and inside, the beds were unmade. Then he made the discovery that would define the mystery forever. All 3 keepers were gone. James Duckett, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur vanished. Inside the lighthouse, the scene was strange, but not chaotic. The kitchen table had the remains of a meal. Some accounts say a chair was knocked over. The clock had stopped. Oilskin coats, the heavy waterproof gear keepers wore in rough weather, were still hanging on their hooks. That detail alone would fuel theories for the next century, because it suggested that whoever went outside didn't expect bad weather, or didn't have time to grab their coats at all. The lighthouse log showed something even stranger. Entries described a severe storm in the days before, winds so violent that the keepers noted Donald MacArthur, a hardened lighthouse man, crying. But officials later checked the weather records. There had been no storm recorded in that area during those days. A calm sea. Nothing that should have shaken experienced keepers like that. Outside, there was damage, but not fresh damage. A box normally stored 110 feet above sea level had been thrown around. Ropes were tangled, and iron railings were bent. But this damage was believed to be from an earlier storm, one that had already passed. The last log entry was dated December 15th, the same day the Archer noticed the light was dark. 3 men, no bodies, no goodbye, no struggle inside. Just an empty lighthouse and an ocean that gave nothing back. The Northern Lighthouse Board sent Robert Muirhead, a superintendent, to investigate. He interviewed Joseph Moore, examined the log, checked the equipment, and inspected the exterior of the island. Muirhead's conclusion was cautious, but leaned toward the most logical explanation available. The men had likely gone outside to secure equipment during rough seas, and one or more of them had been swept off the rocks by a rogue wave. The others may have tried to help and been pulled in as well. It made sense on paper. Eileen Moore's western landing was known to be dangerous in heavy swell, and keepers had lashed equipment down there before. But problems immediately surfaced with this theory too, namely the coats left behind. The calm weather noted by outside observers versus the storm in the log, and the fact that all 3 men would have had to go out together, which broke standard lighthouse procedure. Normally, one man stayed inside no matter what. No trace of the men was ever found. No bodies washed ashore, no wreckage, nothing. The official investigation closed without a definitive answer. And that gap, that silence where an explanation should be, is exactly what let the legends take over. So let's go through the theories. The rogue wave. This remains the most scientifically grounded explanation. The western landing at Flannan Moor sits low and exposed. Freak waves can strike suddenly even in relatively calm seas, especially around the Atlantic's edge in December. If one or two men went to check equipment and were struck, a third may have run out to help, only to be caught by a second wave. This would explain the missing men and the lack of bodies, since the sea around the islands is notoriously good at swallowing evidence. The mismatch in weather reports is often explained by localized swell that wouldn't necessarily show up in broader regional data. A fight or foul play. Some have speculated that tension boiled over between the keepers, perhaps a violent argument, even murder-suicide. This theory gained pop culture traction, but has very little real evidence behind it. Muirhead's investigation found no signs of struggle, no blood, no disturbed furniture beyond what one might expect from men leaving in a hurry. Colleagues described the men as steady, experienced, and professionally matched. Most historians consider this theory weak, panic, and a broken routine. One lesser discussed but compelling idea: the strange, storm-like entries in the log, despite calm weather being reported elsewhere, suggest something disturbed the keepers psychologically, not just physically. Isolation, superstition about the island's reputation, and a genuinely frightening swell event may have caused a breakdown in normal procedure. Instead of one man staying inside as protocol demanded, all three may have gone out together in a moment of panic or urgency, breaking the very rule designed to prevent exactly this kind of loss. The supernatural and sea serpents. Given the island's already ominous folklore, shepherds refusing to overnight there, tales of ghosts and spirits, some accounts from the era leaned into the eerie. Stories of sea monsters, vanishing spirits, or a curse on Flannan Moor circulated in newspapers hungry for a dramatic angle. These make for great campfire tales, but they have no supporting evidence and largely emerged from sensationalized press coverage rather than the official record. A foreign ship or spy story. Some later fictionalized accounts imagined the keepers being kidnapped by a foreign vessel or caught up in an act of espionage. This theory has essentially zero historical grounding and appears to be a byproduct of 20th century thrillers and films loosely inspired by the case rather than anything drawn from Muirhead's findings. Part of what keeps the Flannan Isles case alive more than 120 years later is what it doesn't have. No bodies to bury, no confession, no smoking gun. Just an empty lighthouse, an unfinished log entry, and hanging coats that suggest men who thought they'd be right back. The case has inspired poems, songs, films, and documentaries. Most famously, Wilfred Wilson Gibson's poem Flannan Isles, which took creative liberties, including an untouched meal still steaming on the table, a detail not actually confirmed by the real investigation. Fiction and fact have blended so much over the decades that separating them has become part of the challenge for historians. So, what actually happened? Strip away the ghost stories and the spy fiction, and the evidence keeps pointing to one grim, almost anticlimactic truth: a freak wave and a broken protocol. Here's the likely sequence. A massive swell, the kind Flannan Moor's exposed western landing was already known for, struck the island. One or two keepers went out to secure equipment and check on damage, whether from urgency, fear, or the site's isolating nature wearing on their judgment. The third keeper broke the cardinal rule of lighthouse duty and left the light unattended to help. That's why the coats were still on the hooks. They weren't planning to be out long, or the moment happened too fast to think about it. That's why there's no sign of struggle inside. Nothing violent happened inside the lighthouse at all. And that's why there are no bodies. The North Atlantic, at that stretch of coast, in December, simply doesn't give things back. It isn't a ghost story. It isn't a conspiracy. It's something far more human, and in some ways more haunting. 3 isolated, exhausted men making one small, understandable mistake on one unforgiving night at the edge of the world with no one there to stop them. The lighthouse still stands today, automated now, still warning ships off those same rocks. But the sea that took James Duckett, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur has never told anyone exactly how. If you want more real, unsolved mysteries like this, subscribe, because the ocean doesn't run out of secrets.